Let me just things out of the way. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our another webinar with AgriLogic. Today, we're going over general liability and record keeping. I know record keeping is a big topic for our members, something that a lot of them need help with. So, thank you all for joining us today. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat or Q&A. We can answer them as we go, as well as the end of the webinar, so we'll have to do a Q&A session. But yeah, without further ado, Kim, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us from our webinar here on general liability and record keeping. I am with AgriLogic Consulting, as well as Tom and Brandon that are also on this call. We're a consulting firm. We work with crop insurance as far as developing programs, expert review, administration kind of things, and then also work with producers and companies on how to address risk and provide risk management tools for the agricultural producer. And that just went the wrong way. We are working in concert with Farmer Veteran Coalition with this series of webinars. It's under a grant through the USDA Risk Management Agency for the education side of the risk management agency. So between the three of us, we're working to present these educational videos for farmers and ranchers, new farmers and ranchers that have served in the armed forces. Our objectives today are to review farm liability and some of the risks that you share as growers, as agricultural producers, and discuss the importance of how important it is to keep good records, not just records, but really good records that will benefit your operation. Then we're also going to show you Mars. It's a free app that you can use on your phone that was developed under a similar type of grant through the USDA. So we're going to start first off with liability. Liability means that you're legally obligated or responsible to reimburse somebody for something that happened because it was it could have been an accident, but it was something that you had done, a result of your actions. So in farming, there's a lot of those and a lot of opportunities for you to become liable to damages sustained by others, whether they're property or if it's to their person themselves. So even if the event is unintentional, you can be found liable for something as a result of the actions that you've taken. So some of the different types of personal liability, and one of the big ones is equipment, moving equipment down the road. Even if you do everything right, you have your slow moving triangle on the back, you have lights, you have everything, you get over for people and you do everything exactly right and somebody runs into the back of you. It is possible to still be found liable for that. I do have a farmer that had all the right things, but they were still sued because they were moving big equipment. Doesn't mean that's fair. It just means it is what it is. Livestock can cause all kinds of personal liability, from a black cow being loose in the middle of the road at 6 a.m. in the morning to your goat butting a visitor. I'll never forget the day when my dad walked out of the house and my aunt's goat was standing on top of his brand new car. So livestock have a tendency to open us up to a lot of liability. So do our pets. When Fido bites the feed rep or bites a visitor to your farm. Farm products also can open you up to some liability. Listeria-laden apple cider is a good one. We have a local fall festival that was totally wiped off the map. It no longer is because of some events with some apple cider that made a bunch of people sick, and all the lawsuits that came after that happened. And visitors, anybody that enters your farm, there are always those people that think that danger sign does not apply to them, and they barge on into where they should not be. So anybody visiting your farm, anytime somebody visits your farm, you're open to some liability, same as in your home. So some property liability thoughts. Unfortunate drones. There's a lot of drones being used right now in agriculture, and they don't always go where you thought you were pointing them, and sometimes can cause some damage. Livestock always seem to find that weak spot in the fence, and it's always somewhere near something that your neighbor has that's very tasty. Pets, of course. Fido eats the neighbor's greenhouse plastic, as unlikely as that seems. Our dog did that. He escaped and showed up down the road, and they thought they were being helpful, and they put him in the shed, and they had a whole new roll of plastic for their greenhouse, and yeah, he shredded it. Fire controlled burn. A controlled burn is just a term we use to make us feel better, because as anybody who's done a controlled burn knows, there's always that possibility that it goes from being a controlled burn to an uncontrolled burn. Chemical drift, those chemicals that we use for weed and pests, sometimes they go places where we didn't intend them to go because of wind issues. And then pollution and accidental upset of the honey wagon into the local creek. And by a honey wagon, I mean anything that carries manure. They have a tendency to turn over or tip in the absolutely possible worst place. Some other miscellaneous liability: your failure to fulfill a contract. If you have a contract for your crops or your livestock and you fail to fulfill that contract, you're liable for whatever the contract says for not fulfilling that contract. And then lawsuits. Those of us that are born and raised in the country, we know that the country comes with its own special set of smells. However, people who have never lived in it and move out and build a nice big home just downwind from where you're running your hogs have a tendency to not like the smells quite as well. So lawsuits, whether they're legit or not, can always be a possibility for a source of liability. So how do we mitigate, or how do we reduce that liability? Well, first thing that we need to do is identify what are our risks. What are the risks that I may become liable for something? And then I need to evaluate that impact. How are those risks going to impact my operation? Is it something that's minor, that's not a big deal, or is it something that could totally destroy my operation? And then it's managing my risks. So what can I do to help offset that risk or to reduce that risk? I'm going to talk first about identifying your risk. So identifying and understanding your risks are really, really important, because you can't address them if you don't identify them and understand where they are and where the risks are coming from. In farming operations, those risks vary greatly. So we are not going to be able to list each one, because there's a lot of variabilities. For example, the type of commodity that you are involved in on your operation. There's livestock, they carry their own particular set of liabilities as far as getting out, damaging other people's property, even livestock death, things along that line. If you're growing processing crops, in other words, crops that are going to go in, they're going to be processed into something else. You have a separate set of liabilities with disease and pests and things along that line. And then fresh crops have those same disease and pest issues. Fruits and vegetables, things along that lines, are going to sell direct to the consumer, but they also have a fresh new set of liabilities as far as being able to keep them in good shape until you get them sold, things along that line. How you sell your product makes a difference in what your risks are, whether you're selling it wholesale, for example, to a processor, somebody that's going to take it and make it into something else, grain elevator, livestock option, or retail. For example, if you have a roadside stand, or if you participate in a CSA, pick your own, fresh beef or frozen beef, things along that line, milk, all those things. If you're selling direct to the consumer, that opens you up to a different set of risks. So if we went through all those risks, that would be a whole webinar on itself to try to identify all those risks. And of course, your operation may have risks that are basically only applicable to your operation because of some kind of geographic feature or the people around you, something like that. So we haven't gone into great detail on, identifying your risks, other than because it's such a wide variety of risks that are out there. Not all of them apply to you, and some not all apply to me. So it's identifying which risks are out there for my operation. Some common risks that in your operation is a reduced income. It's always one of the big ones. If you have a reduction in income, you're obviously going to have probably a loss, or at least if you could hope to even break even. So some of the reasons that you have reduced income: weather, pest, disease, or even poor agronomy decisions on your part, not doing your due diligence as far as what seed to plant or when to spray for this type of critter, and not scouting your crops, things along that line. Low prices and high costs. Whenever costs are up, input costs go up, because everybody, of course, wants their share of the pie, or at least that's the way we always feel. They don't always move together. For example, sometimes you'll have a worldwide shortage of a particular input, and it will cause the input cost to go through the roof, but prices don't respond for quite some time. So prices and costs, while they kind of move together, they don't always move together at the same time. So, and then there's always equipment breakdown or malfunction. My mother-in-law used to say, if I had nothing, it would break. If you have equipment, it is going to break, and it could delay your planting, could delay your harvest while your crop is sitting out there rotting in the field. Or in the case of, for example, milk or something that has to be refrigerated, it could result in spoilage. So those are some really common things that can happen on your farm that you need to be analyzing what will happen if those kind of things happen. And then there's always accidents that result in injury to you or to others, and then or damage to property, yours or someone else's. And then you have what other people do. For example, if your neighbor sprays his crop with a certain chemical and it hits your peach trees, you may not have peaches that year. So it's no fault of your own, but that's a risk that you need to be looking at. Financial risk is a big one. Lack of capital, cash when you need it, or a decrease in income. Those are big risks to your operation. And then there's regulatory risks. For everything that you do in farm, well, I shouldn't say everything, but most everything in farming that you do, there is a rule in place for it. So you got food safety regulations. You have regulations that talk about how you handle chemicals. There are labor laws if you hire help. Waste disposal, how you get rid of your waste is a big one. And of course, then you've always got tax regulations. Failure to know the regulation is not a valid defense. You cannot just plead and say, I didn't know about this. You need to know what the regulations are for your industry. And then business continuity is a big one that a lot of people that don't think about. But what would happen if you were injured? Who's going to come in and take care of the animals if you were injured? Is there, you need to have an emergency plan. What would happen if a tornado took out this shed? What would I do in this case? So business continuity is a big one that a lot of people really don't spend enough time thinking about as far as a risk. Those are just a few. The next thing you need to be doing is evaluating your risk. What are the odds that this risk will happen? I saw a beautiful flower that I really loved the other day, and I really wanted to plant it in my flower bed, but it doesn't grow. It will not survive the winters where I live. So that is obviously the odds are that flower is going to die. How often might the circumstances occur? Well, it gets cold every winter, so every year. So the frequency, how often does this happen? And then the severity. How bad is it? How big can the damage be? I live on the west side of Illinois. We have hail, but typically, not always, but typically it doesn't destroy my whole crop. Whereas if I live in Nebraska, I've seen some pictures of hailstorms out there that just shredded everything. Like I said, we've had hailstorms that have done some serious damage in our area, but they don't happen near as often as they do in other places. So frequency and severity determine how big your risk is. So you need to be kind of evaluating that. What is the frequency? What is the severity? So how big of a risk is this to my operation? And then we just need to manage that risk. I mean, risk is something that can be managed. There are several strategies. And by managed, I don't mean eliminate, because I think, as we all know, there is no way to eliminate all risk. But how do we reduce it to a point where it won't take out our operation if it happens? So identify your possible strategies. For example, avoid risk. So how can we avoid risk? We can grow berries, but we don't take it the next step and make jams and sell jam. Or in the case of the apple cider, we grow apples, but we don't make cider. So that's avoiding the risk of a product, an end-use product, selling directly. And another way of avoiding risk is not selling direct to the consumer. Reducing our risk. And I know when we start, and having been at the beginning of a starting a farm, there are ways that we try to cut costs. Some costs that we cut are not worth cutting because they increase our risk. For example, instead of just breaking down and redoing a stretch of fence, we try to patchwork the old, and those cows just always seem to find that spot where we patchworked. So we always are going to have some risk. We're going to retain a portion of the risk. So that's really important that we build that rainy day fund for those things that we just cannot control. Or sometimes the risk is just so low and it won't be a major impact on your operation. So you determine this will not cause a huge deal on my operation. So I'll just retain that risk. I won't, I'll build a rainy day fund to cover it if it should happen. And then we can transfer all or a portion of our risk. And that is like, for example, insurance. Insurance is saying, hey, insurance company, you take on this risk for this many dollars. I'm going to take the risk that I have and I'm going to hand it off to you in exchange for premium. Basically, premium is that exchange. You're paying them to take on your risk. Marketing contracts are one where you're saying to the grain elevator or to the futures market, you're saying, for this fee, I'm going to get you take on the risk of the price going up or down, things along that line. So there's ways to transfer all, or typically not all. It's very difficult to transfer all your risk, but you can transfer a big portion of your risk to someone else. You need to spend some time considering the cost and the impact that a risk or an event could have on your operation, and identify those things that are the biggest risks, and then just kind of work down your list. And I know it seems like there's a whole lot of risks, and there are, but you just need to put them in the order of the importance and how big they can be, and then try to find strategies or a combination of strategies that will work to help reduce your risk to a manageable level. One of the areas that we talked about, for example, is insurance. For a premium, for a dollar amount, the insurance company is going to take on my risk. For example, for my property, we all have car insurance, we have homeowners insurance, and there's a farm insurance. We have a general property for like our buildings and things along that line. We have liability insurance for those people that just cannot read the sign that says do not step here. Workers' compensation, if we have people that work for us to help if they're injured in an accident. And there's crop insurance that will help to offset losses that you have to your production. So there's many, and this is just a few, but there's many different types of ways to hand off that risk to someone else. As far as resources, there are a lot of good resources available out there. I mean, if you just start doing a search out there for risk, a lot of them come, a lot of good presentations show up. One of the areas I like to guide you toward is your local cooperative extension system. There's 112 land grant universities in the United States and colleges, and they have cooperative extension agents that can help you with a lot of getting started on your farm. They can help you with, for example, in our area, we've got an extension agent that's really good at perennials, berries and fruits and nuts. And you can call him, and he is so helpful as far as getting you up and started and what to look for and pointing you in the right direction for resources. So your extension agent in your area is a really valuable resource. And then I just picked out two at random. It's not that they're any better or any worse than anybody else. It's just there were two that caught my eye, and I thought, well, I'll just throw them in the presentation just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that are out there that can help you identify your risks and help you to manage your risks. So we're getting ready to move into the record keeping section of this presentation. And I just wanted to kind of stop here and say, Brandon or Diego, is there any questions or anything that we need to stop here and address?
We had one that was answered by Brandon. Will having visitors sign a release of liability be beneficial? And Brandon put that it would be best to consult legal counsel regarding release of liability for your particular operation. Would you agree with that, Kim?
I would, yes, definitely. And the thing that I always find really unfair, my mom told me years ago when I was little, life is not fair. That's where you go to get a lemon shake up. you can have all the releases you want, but that will not stop somebody from suing you. But it might help with your success on the outcome. Yes, looking whenever you, especially if you're going to have a you-pick kind of operation where you have people come onto your farming operations, that you really definitely want to seek out legal counsel. How are the best ways? And that's one where I would especially consult with a legal counsel in your area. That's probably not an area I'd go to online, but just having someone that you would be a good resource from the legal side. Definitely for sure there.
Okay. And then
We've got to go ahead, Diego.
I'll go ahead. We have a question in the chat. What liabilities do you know of are unique to aquaculture?
Ooh, well, definitely disease and things along that line. Failure of equipment, because, and I will confess, the only aquaculture I know is going fishing in my pond. And I know we had a big winter kill one time. Keeping your equipment, keeping things moving. You've got large bodies of water, so you're going to have the risk of someone getting in there that shouldn't. And I can't go, as far as that's about the limit of my knowledge, but my suggestion would always be when thinking about going into a line of work is trying to find the people that are in that line of work and asking the experts, and the experts are the people on the ground. So finding someone who's doing what you want to do and going to visit them. There are a lot of people out there who love to share when they've got something they're passionate about. They love to share about it. And so finding that person that's been doing it a long time and spending that money, hey, that trip that you take, this is not tax advice, but there's a very good chance that it's a write-off for your business, because you are going to learn from that person on how to create your business. So
we have another couple questions. One, I'm going to have to spend a little more time on reading, but the other is kind of along the lines, Kim, of the aquaculture question. And it's this person says, I've been seeking proper insurance coverage for beehives and equipment. Any suggestions? I have general liability, but want more specific to cover it better and liabilities. And I think your advice on speaking to those that are in that industry is good. What else would we say to that?
Well, especially on the bee side, there is actually a crop insurance program called apiculture, which we're going to have a presentation on, I think, in July, that helps basically with production risks. But when you're talking about liability risks, disease risks, things along that line, same thing with the aquaculture. Find somebody who's been doing it, that's considered an expert, that's really passionate about it, that likes to share with people. And a lot of times you'll find associations, and I don't know the beekeeper ones, but there are national or local associations where you can find these people. But just learning, and not just one, but learning from several experts will give you more. I feel like it have more value than sitting reading online all day long. As far as the insurance side, that I'm not sure. But again, I think those associations can help guide you, finding the associations that do that, that do apiculture, that do beekeeping. They can help guide you as far as, well, here's what I did for insurance, or, property, casualty, etc. So go to the experts, and those are the people that are doing it well.
All right. Thank you for that. Right. And Brandon, you say you can.
Yeah, I need to spend some more time reading through this first question, and we'll respond to that one.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move along.
Actually, Tim, we did just have another one pop into the chat. Could you walk us through a scenario where a farmer who is properly insured suffers a crop loss due to drought? How do they conduct a claim, and what resolution is typically offered?
Okay, well, first off, this goes back to the slide about many different risks. It depends on what your crop is. For example, if you have federal crop insurance, which is an area that we spend a lot of our lives in, actually, it's been my life since 2001. Federal crop insurance has a lot of different types of policies that cover trees. It's policies that cover the fruit off those trees. There's policies that cover the rainfall in an area that is important to how the bees survive. So there are a lot of different policies, but it all starts with, if you think you have a loss, well, first off, you have to meet with a crop insurance agent and you have to buy a policy. All policies don't cost anything until you plant your first acre. If it's a perennial crop or along the lines of apiculture, that's when it, when that coverage starts, is when premium is due, and it's usually payable down the road a little ways. It just depends on the crop. Everything starts with your agent, finding a good agent. And this also goes back to when you're talking, when you find those experts, who does your crop insurance? I need to find an agent that understands it. And then when you sustain an event that is a loss, you'll contact that agent and you'll file a notice of loss. And then a loss adjuster from the company, the crop insurance company, will contact you, and they'll come out to your farm and they'll explain to you, what they need. And again, it goes back to what kind of crop insurance and what kind of crop that you're growing. For, let's just say, apiculture, bees, the loss adjuster will come out and kind of do some confirmation. Well, actually, in that, they actually don't come out and do any, because it's all triggered by rainfall indexes that have happened at NOAA weather stations, not your particular farm, but at NOAA weather stations. So it's just an automatic thing. I think they do some confirmation work. You do sometimes have to visit with a loss adjuster, but let's just say you do grapes for wine. The loss adjuster will come out to the farm. They're going to ask for, if you've already sold the grapes, or if they're on it, then they're going to ask for those records. This is where records come in really important. Or if they're still on the vine, let's say that they're damaged and you're not going to harvest them, and they're still on the vine, they'll do an appraisal to appraise about how much good fruit's there versus how much bad. And they'll walk you through the whole process, and then they will send you an indemnity check for whatever your loss is. All crop insurance has deductibles, depending on the crop. It could be anywhere from 25% deductible to, well, you can go up to 50%. You choose what your elections are. Some have 20% deductible. So it just depends on the crop. But the federal crop insurance program is subsidized by the government. So that's one of the best. The federal crop insurance program is not designed to make a profit. So the premiums are as low as they could possibly go. And then the premiums are also subsidized by the government. So that's a really important one to look into. Your general liability and P&C, that's, just like anything else, get several quotes, talk to several different agents, and find the one that you feel like understands your operation the best. It may be somebody local, or it may not. If you get into specialty kind of things, sometimes it's best to get with an agent that understands what you're doing and may not be in your hometown. So hope that kind of answers it. Your agent is always involved in getting the loss started, though. They don't just kind of leave you out there hanging.
All right, Kim, the other question in our Q&A, I've spent some more time on it, and it seems like kind of like a two-part question to me. And the first part is, if you have a crop failure and there was a contract involved, and you're not able to meet that contract, would there be kind of your reputation and goodwill be eroded? And I would say that in general, these crop insurance programs are designed to incentivize the producer to produce a crop and fulfill their contracts, and not to make a profit off of the insurance program. Right. And the second part of that question is there any way to help, let me kind of paraphrase, is there any way to insure against losing a contract due to crop failure? And I don't know that there is such a thing, is there?
Not that I know of. And of course, all contracts in all industries are different. So let's say that you do a contract with a processor, and there is a crop failure because of a hailstorm. Those processors understand agriculture, and they understand that happens. And some processors actually require you to carry federal crop insurance, so that if that happens, you can but you basically are reimbursing them for what was lost. And they go ahead and leave your contract in place. So it depends on how the contract is written, how all that works. But I can't think of any industry in which they would never deal with a farmer again because a hailstorm came through and wiped them out. I can think of one where a processor wouldn't work with a farmer again because he failed to do weed control, and whatever he tried to deliver was just full of weeds, and he obviously didn't take care of the crop. So, as long as you're controlling what you can control and grow it in the way that to produce a crop with the idea that you're going to produce a crop, your processors are going to understand if there's some kind of agronomic problem that you can't deliver. Their goal is to find good producers who year in, year out provide a good source of whatever it is that they're trying to process. But they do understand the impacts of hail, tornadoes, freeze, too much rain, too little rain. So, entering into a contract with the processor is a good thing. Just make sure you read your contract carefully and understand what happens if you don't have the production to fill the contract. And it's always spelled out in that contract. I mean, that's part of a contract. It has to explain what happens if one or the other fails to hold up their end. So going in what the penalties would be if you can't fulfill the contract. And a lot of times, things along the lines of hail, environmental things, a lot of the contracts will have very minimal penalties. Or they may ask you to carry crop insurance, and they may ask you to pay what you get reimbursed from the crop insurance company. So it's just reading your contract and knowing how that works.
All right. Thanks, Kim. That's all we have for right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. If that didn't answer it quite, enough, then please let us know, and we'll kind of go into it a little bit further. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about record keeping now. Record keeping is a big one. And basically with record keeping, it's number one question. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you thinking about doing what you're doing? I don't know how many of you are already involved in agricultural endeavors, or how many are just thinking about it, but the primary purpose is why? Is it because it's something you love? So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then the second most important question is, when do I need to start showing a profit? How long can I, because we all know new endeavors, they don't make money very rarely. I haven't been involved in any that make money right out of the gate. So how long can I go until I have to turn a profit? So question number 3, why is record keeping important, and how do you keep good records? Because there's a difference between records and good records. So we're going to kind of talk about these items over the next several slides. What is the purpose of your agricultural operation? Are you doing it to feed your family and provide for you and your family? Are you doing it to raise money for a cause? Or are you doing just a hobby because you like it? You love working with goats and you think they're just really cool, and that's a hobby. Well, either way, no matter what the purpose is, you're going to have to make money at some point, unless you've got a really, really big nest egg and you don't mind just letting it keep losing money. So at some point you need to break even, or at least make a little bit of money to keep the operation going. So that's where the good records come in. It's the information to make decisions to help you keep that operation going. The records are important because they help you to understand your profit and your loss. And then when you understand if you're making money or losing money, then you can make decisions on how I can make more money or how I can stop losing money. What do I need to do? What is eating into my profit? They also help you to create a business plan for your future. And anytime that you go to borrow money, they're going to ask for a business plan. What does they say? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You have to have a plan. You need to sit down and go, okay, here's where I'm starting. Here's where I want to end up at, or at least, where I feel like I will have made it. Now, how do I get there? Well, without records, you're not going to know if you're on track to make those goals. It also helps to establish the value of an operation. There may come a point in time where you say, you know, this is not exactly what I want to do, or I'm ready to retire or something, and you want to sell the operation. And it might be something that you want to pass down to your next generation. So you'll need a value for that. And records come into play in establishing that value of your operation. And as I mentioned before, access to capital. If you don't have records to show your profit, your loss, your goals, your business plan, it's very rare that anybody's going to loan you any money. It might have to be grandma, grandpa, or your best friend, because any business that's in the business of loaning money to new entities is going to ask you to show us what your business plan is and what have you done so far and what are your records. And then as you go, they're going to continue to ask you for those records. And having been on the lending side, the better the records, the better my confidence is in that grower, and the more likely I am to give a little more leeway. Whereas the person that can't show where their money is going, I'm less likely to I'm less likely to loan money to them. So USDA, United States Department of Agriculture programs. There are a lot of programs out there. We're going to have a presentation at the end of this. I'll show you the dates, but on other USDA programs, all the different USDA programs you might be eligible for. And of course, the tax man. Good records are important for your taxes. When you go into an agriculture operation, you are a business. And therefore, you have to be able to show your profit and your loss, and you have to be able to back it up. And regulatory compliance. If you're spraying a particular chemical or things along that line, if you're in the dairy industry, how often are you cleaning your equipment? There's a lot of different regulatory compliance rules that you'll need to keep good records on. And then defense against legal actions. Just because somebody sues you doesn't mean that you're liable, but it just means that somebody thinks that they can sue you. And good records will help you to win a case. I was reading a story about a grower that, in this case, it was an actual government entity, was allowing more water to come across their land than what the agreement said. And they had to be able to show that they sustained a loss because of that. And because of their good records, they were able to, and they ended up winning the case in court. But you've got to be able to defend yourself against legal actions, and you need good records in case that you have sustained an injury, that you can show what your injury is. So records are very, very important, and probably for anybody that enjoys livestock or being outdoors, raising a crop, records are your least favorite part, but that is probably one of your more important parts. So why are good records important? You can keep records, but good records are more important than anything. And why are good records important? Well, they're accurate. Records don't do you any good if they're not accurate. You can't swag on record keeping. You can't just make things up. I have seen a lot of interesting record files, file cabinets, shoe boxes to folders, etc. In my life, if I had my way, I would not have a file cabinet. I'm a big proponent of electronic records. That was a learned behavior. For those of you that are my age, you know that we did not grow up with electronic records and scanning things and filing electronic. And we have this great fear that the computer will crash and we'll lose everything, which back in the day, that did happen. It is less likely to happen now, but I've gotten to where I could do without a piece of paper ever. I've finally gotten there. But good records are important, whether they're paper records or electronic records. Good records, being able to find them and that they're in order and you can access them. And then they have to be acceptable to the requester. For example, in crop insurance, it requires scale tickets to have your name on it. There's certain things that have to be on that for it to qualify as an acceptable record. So you need to know For example, in crop insurance, what do my records need to look like? Now, if you're dealing with, for example, a grain elevator or a livestock market or things along that line, their records almost always comply. But if you're just selling something to the neighbor or to your local meat processor, it's important that you make sure that the records that they provide you have everything on them that the crop insurance company or the tax man is going to require them to be on there. What are good records? They have to be accurate. We mentioned that earlier, but they have to also be verifiable. Can't just be a napkin where your neighbor wrote down some dollar amounts. They got to be accurate and verifiable, organized and easy to access. The last thing you want is to spend days looking for records when you could do it in hours or an hour. You don't want to include any of your personal records in with your farming operation records. You want to make sure that you keep those separate because they can kind of get in each other's way and, again, make it harder to find what you're looking for. And really important, as simple as possible. Keep it as simple as possible. If it's too difficult, you're not going to do it. It's just really important that you don't want to keep it too simple, but as simple as you can. Big tip is keep your personal finance records separate from your farm, from your business. So you need to know if your business is profitable, and if you have been writing personal expenses out of your farm entity and you can't separate between the two, it's going to be really hard for you to understand if your farm is if it's separate. I'm sorry, if it's profitable. So set yourself up a farm business account, a separate checking account. All of your farm revenue goes into that account. All of your farm expenses come out of that account. Keep that separate from your personal account. Your off-farm income versus your personal expenses. It's really important to keep that. In these day and age, they don't, there's a lot of banks out there that don't charge for extra for a separate account. It's just really important that you have that separate account. Now, that's not to say that you can't take some of your farm profit and move it into your personal account to pay for some of your personal expenses, but you want to be able to show, here's my farm income, here's my farm expenses out of that one account. Then you can make yourself a payment, an equity payment. So for financial records, there's 4 basic types. One is your income or your revenue, and that comes from your commodity sales, payments from the government, other income, anything that's incomed into your business. And then there's the expenses, all the money that goes out for inputs and all of your maintenance costs and things along that line. So you have your income minus your expenses equals your profit. And then you'll be keeping track of your assets, your equipment, land, buildings, fences, and if you owe any money against those assets. So those are the 4 types of financial records that you'll have. I don't know if they do accounting classes in high school anymore or not, but we were always required in our little high school to take accounting classes. And those are the 4 first things that you learn. Income minus expense equals your profit. You've got your assets and your liabilities. So those are kind of important to know. There's several different ways of keeping track of those accounting methods. Probably the easiest one is cash accounting, and probably the majority of small businesses do a cash accounting method. When I write the check, that date is what goes into my bookkeeping system. When I get paid for selling my crop, that's the date that it goes, that's a calendar year and the date that it goes into my bookkeeping system. So everything I sold in this calendar year is my income. Everything, all the expenses and things that I bought this calendar year are my expenses. Typically for small businesses, sometimes there's overlap. You may buy a calf in the fall, but you don't sell that calf, you don't take it to market till the next year. So you're kind of doing a little bit of overlap there. So you can't look at your calendar year to see what how much you made or lost off that calf, but that is the easiest way. And there are other methods to keep track of that. And then you have your accrual accounting. And basically it looks at when did you become liable for, when did you incur that expense? For example, if you've had some, you sold some product, but you sold some product in December, but they weren't going to pay you till January. You set up an accounts receivable in that for that money that's due to you. And so that way it hits your books in that calendar year instead of waiting until the next calendar year. A little more complicated. It uses inventory accounts, accounts receivables, accounts payables, typically used by larger businesses and corporations. So that gives them a clearer picture of what happened in this calendar year. Or sometimes they have a fiscal year, which is, it doesn't start on January 1 and end on December 31st. So this would be a good place to talk to your accountant if you have one, the best ways to keep track of, if you want to be a cash account or a cash accounting or accrual accounting. 9 times out of 10, if you're starting out, it's going to be a cash accounting system. And then there's what we call production records. So you've got your financial records, but those are different than your production records. And production records are particularly important, like when you get into crop insurance along that line. And they also help you as far as decision making. So for example, on livestock, when you acquired the animal, feed records, how much feed do you need to get them from point A to point B? Sales records, how many did you sell and what was the average weight for them? And then production, how much does this particular cow put out, or and then you can look at your feed records versus your production records, particularly like dairy and things on that line is, why did my production go down? Well, it might be a good time to look at your feed records. So there's your production records are really important. They're not part of your finances, so to speak, but they are very important in helping you make managerial decisions. Some crop production records that you will need. How many acres did you plant? When did you plant it? When did you harvest it? What kind of seed hybrids did you use? What are your planting populations? It had a really bad year. Well, maybe your fertilization or your pesticide or your herbicide applications didn't match your acreage. And then your quantity of production sold. So how much did I sell? Well, it's down this year. Why is it down this year? Could be a drought, or it could be that I need to look at some fertilization of this land that I'm planting this crop on, or it could be that this method of production does not work on my acreage. So all of those production records are ones that you're going to use to understand why your profit or loss is what it is. You'll also need those production records if you, for example, do crop insurance. And a lender is going to want to know, what are you planting? What is your yield? What is your average? Because they're trying to find out if you're a really good manager of the crop or the commodity. Your record keeping gets more in depth as you get bigger. The greater your complexity is, the more records that you keep. So for example, if you've just got 20 goats and 50 chickens, your record keeping detail is going to be a whole lot less than if you have a lot of acreage, a lot of cows, and you do some custom harvesting on the side. So this is something that, if you're starting small, you'll grow into. It's not something that you start out with. However, it's always good if you've got goals to be, you're here and your goals are to be up here, it's always good to start with a system that will grow into that and will provide you the information that you need to get there. So records, we kind of did a little acronym here. They're reliable. You're wasting your time if they are not accurate, and easily accessible. You're going to stop doing it if it's too hard. Current, they need to be your current records, and you need to be able to find your current records organized. Again, I might have them in a shoebox. It's easy to get to the shoebox, but it's just a pile of papers. Running totals are important. You need to know where you're at as you're going through the year, because if you're hitting a point where it's starting to look like you've spent too much money, you might need to be putting off some things till next year, or until you've sold some production. Detailed, appropriate levels. When you get into federal crop insurance, you're going to have what they call units. Is it is it at a field level? Is it at a county level? And so on your details, it depends on what you're growing as to what your appropriate levels are. And then simple. The harder it is, the less likely you are to do it, and the more chances that there's going to be errors. So as simple as possible while still providing the information you need. So some of the record keeping tools. Well, there's hand records, just a simple logbook or a checkbook register. For a small operation, a checkbook register will provide you pretty much everything you need as long as you're keeping good notes in it. You could take it up a notch and do a spreadsheet. Spreadsheets can do some amazing things and help you to do some analyzing of your expenses versus your income. So there's a lot of analysis tools that you can do in your spreadsheet. There's different software that's available. There's some simple cash systems such as Quicken or Mars, which we're going to talk about Mars here in a minute. And then down at the bottom, excuse me, I want to make sure that I put here, this is not an endorsement for any. This is just, if you get online, start looking at them. You're going to see some of these accounting softwares. We're not endorsing any. We're just saying these are some of the ones that are out there, but they're not all of them. And accountants can also help, a lot of times help you set up on these. And back to the associations and experts. What did they use? How did they keep track of things? Just kind of general cash accrual accounting systems, QuickBooks, DAC-Easy, Peachtree. There are some that are specific to agricultural operations. And then there are add-ons that you can add on to your existing spreadsheets to keep that. So a lot of different tools out there. Again, this is one of those things where when you're first starting out, you really don't have to know everything about everything, which has always been very difficult for me. But you grow into a lot of these things. All right. Any question about record keeping at this point? I'll stop here and I'll take a quick drink to get rid of this hairball. Brandon, Diego.
I'm sorry, Kim. I was in the middle of typing out a response to a question. I think pending my response here, I think we may be okay for now.
Okay, cool beans. Okay, so we're going to move into Mars, Mobile Advantage Record Keeping Software. This is free software that we developed with under a USDA Risk Management Agency partnership. So this is not a for-profit endeavor. It's just basically to aid operations, small operators, to start down the road of keeping good record keeping. And of course, we've got our little fancy little scanny things there, as you want to call them. What are those things called again? I can never remember them. URLs? Well, they're what?
QR codes.
QR codes. I can never remember the names of them, but I just call them, those little boxes.
Yep.
My generation showing. Anyhow, it's designed to fit the needs of, today's modern agricultural producer. We're aiming this at small and beginning farmers, and it's to catch your expenses and income as you go throughout the year. Remember, back to the keep it simple kind of thing. Some of the advantages of the Mars application. It's an app that you can download. I forgot to mention, from the Apple or the Play Store. It keeps your revenue and your expenses kind of on as you incur them. And then you can always do a real-time understanding of where you're at in the year. It does keep the records you need for your tax return, your federal tax return, and for the whole Farm Revenue Protection Crop Insurance Program, which we've got a webinar out there, I think, already recorded on it. It also helps keep track of mileage. So if you have a vehicle that you use to go pick up parts to deliver some of your eggs or along that line, you need to keep track of those miles. And this gives you good mileage tracking that will meet IRS requirements. You can take pictures of your receipts and digitally store your receipts. The data is protected as confidential, secured in a cloud-based platform, or you can use it in an offline mode as well. Again, this data does not get sold. This is not a for-profit venture. This is something that the United States Department of Agriculture financed to help beginning farmers and ranchers. And then you could get online on a PC and access all your information through that portal and download some of that information to work with offline. And it can be used across a wide variety of operations. So I'm just going to kind of show you just some screenshots from it. This is the home screen on an iPhone. Of course, that little gray there is the iPhone. Not my phone, but Ethan put this slideshow together. It's pretty cool how it kind of shows you all the things that are available. So you can see you add income, add expenses. There's the mileage tracker there, and then there's some analytics that are also included with the program. So the first thing is adding income. So by just clicking on the add income, then you can type in, what it is that you're selling, how much you sold it for. If you know the cost basis, in other words, what it cost you to create this, you can also put in the cost basis right there. And it's just a simple matter of putting it in as you sell them. And you can put some little notes in there that you sold, how many you sold, 17 dozen eggs, had 18, but dropped a dozen. So you sold 17 dozen eggs at the market. So then the next screenshot you got, and you can see across the top there in the gold, it's showing home, income, expenses, and analytics on your screen. The next one is to add an expense. So if you, let's say you go down to the local feed store and you're going to pick up some cattle feed, and you put in your dates and your amounts and your category, what it is. And so it defaulted to chemicals, but you can change it to feed, and then you just put in where it was that you bought it at and what it was that you bought. I think that was the last part of it. And you've got, plenty of room here to put any kind of notes. So you can kind of do these as you go. The idea is that you have records on the go. Oh, let me back up too. I forgot. Hit the advance too fast. You also can take a picture of it. But I went too fast. See, there's a camera icon at the bottom of this screen. And so you take your receipt that you will need for your income taxes, and you'll take a picture of that receipt. So he's going to do that here in just a second. I apologize. I needed in my notes something that said pause.
Kim, while that's doing that, a question that we had that came through the chat is, what features of farm-specific software make it better? What would you say to that?
I would say that I haven't used them all. So it's very difficult for me to say which software is better, because I haven't seen them all, haven't used them all. So I wouldn't want to go on record as saying this is the best one ever. Right now, we currently are using in our operation, not farm specific. But while I was putting this presentation together, I saw one that was farm specific, and I went, wow, I might want to try that. So it depends. I guess in my thought, I would go with as you're starting out, you don't need a lot. But on the other hand, if you're planning to grow and in the next few years you're going to grow a lot, then maybe it is worth investing in, because all these apps, they cost money to do. But sometimes if you're going to be at this point in a couple of years, you might be better off just starting with that, even though you don't really need it right now. So I can't say, I wouldn't want to go on record as saying this one's better than that one, because I haven't used them all. I would read a lot of reviews, again, talk to people in your industry and say, there may be some out there that I don't even know about that are specific to beekeepers. And, it's just one of those things that's very specific. So you're going to have to do a little research for your operation and what to use there. Accountants are usually a lot of good resource. And of course, our internet, it's amazing what you can find out there. As far as things, and talking to accountants, talking to people who do what you do. Okay, income and expenses tab. So I've put in my income and I put in my expense. And so this little tab just kind of shows, here's where you're at right now. Most of it so far has been the dark blue, what you sold. There are some where you did some custom hire work, and then some other income. And then on the expenses side, it breaks it down into different categories as to what you've spent up to this point in time. And then you can, of course, filter those it basically say, okay, here's my production, but I just want to see, I think it goes into squash. Yes, there is an R in squash, just like there's an R in wash. But yeah, you can filter those down by specific types of crops, so that you are only looking at those, filter them down. And then the analytics tab puts the income and the expenses together to give you where you're at right now. Remember, we talked about, having it on the go. Where am I at right now at this point in time? So this goes back to the keeping it simple, doing it as you go. It doesn't take very long. We spend a lot of time texting on our phones. It doesn't take very long to make an entry when you incur it. And then you can do some analytics with it as far as quarterly, annually, things along that line. And there's an email report thing, or you can also do these online on a computer if you're like me. I mean, the little tiny screen just gets smaller and smaller the older I get. So you can also look at this information on a PC, a little bigger screen. Mileage tracker. So on this mileage tracker, you basically are going to put in, excuse me, where you're going, what you're doing, and you have a start and a stop, and it calculates how many miles that you went, or you can also do it manually. So there is the mileage tracker, and that's very important from a tax standpoint, because when you're using a personal vehicle in your operation, they're going to, if you would ever get audited, you're going to need to know where those miles came from. And this is kind of like, this is the Mars record portal that you'll see online, and you can download that to an Excel spreadsheet. There's a filter up there that certain time frames that, if you want to just look at a quarter or a month or a year, and it just puts out all of your expenses and all your income onto a spreadsheet, which is really handy for your tax accountant if you want to take that in. So in summary, good record keeping, that is the foundation of your operation. Knowing when you're making a profit, when you're making a loss, if you're achieving your goals. It helps you to identify your risks and to manage those risks. Those together, managing your risks and keeping your records, is what helps to make your profit. So it's kind of like a pyramid. They all are dependent upon each other. But the top of the line there is we want to increase our profit. So kind of a summary, just an icon to keep in your head. So that concludes this webinar. I think I'll stop here. Matter of fact, I think I'll go back to it and say, any questions at this point in time?
There is one. Does the software, I assume this is in reference to Mars, track payroll, tax deposits, and state taxes?
No, it does not. It's just a very simple income and expense. Yeah, we'd love to develop it out that far, but it's just a very simple income and expense type. That's why it's geared more towards smaller growers. But it's not to say that you're catching your stuff that you couldn't use that in your larger accounting to import or put your records in, but it's more geared towards smaller ones, and it doesn't have a payroll function. Anything else?
No, that's it, Kim.
Okay. Cool. All right, so the ones here that are the ones that we've already done. Of course, you can see May 6th, general liability and record keeping. We just completed that one. So what's coming up? June 4th is a food safety. So that would be for those of you that are growing any kind of food products that are going to be consumed going to be eaten by the consumer. Or could be for animals as well, but we're talking livestock. Regardless of whether you sell them wholesale or retail, there are a lot of rules and regulations and things you need to do for food safety. So that's coming up on June 4th. Really going to be an interesting presentation. Then on July 2nd is what we call apiculture, which is beekeeping, or pasture, rangeland, and forest. It's a forage. It's a federal crop insurance program. That is basically an index program, looks at how much rain fell in your area, not specifically on your farm, but in your area, to determine if you had a loss of pasture or rangeland or forage, or if you would have problems with your honey production. So that's on July 2nd. July 30th, we're going to cover some other risk management programs for the Farm Service Agency, some of the programs that they have available, and things along that line. So that would be our July 30th. And then the final presentation in this series is just an open Q&A panel discussion that's on August 27th. And this is a group that works on this program here at AgriLogic. And with that, I don't have anything else to share with you today unless you've got some questions.
Yeah, we had a few that I think Brandon's working on.
Okay.
Let's see. There's one that says, perhaps you missed it, but how quickly do you have to show a profit?
Depends on how deep your pockets are. The bottom line is it's your operation, so how long can you afford to go until you run out of money? So it depends on the type of operation you're starting as to how quickly you can turn that operation around. But it's all about how much money you have available.
Okay. And let's see. I believe that is it. So thank you, Kim. Thank you, Brandon, for answering questions. Says this was a little longer than usual, but it will be up on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. There's our contact information right there. And I can also send your questions to AgriLogic as well.
Oops.
Tom, did you have a question or something to say?
Oh,
Or
shoot. My God.
Oh, yeah, sorry. We have one question come in, right as you were speaking, asking about the food safety webinar on June 4th. That is the only date we have that scheduled, but as Diego mentioned, the webinar will be recorded and made available on the Farmer Veteran YouTube channel. So you would be able to view that afterwards.
Yes. Thank you for that, Tom. So yeah, this will be edited and hopefully up on our YouTube channel for the next week or so. So just be on the lookout for that. But as always, thank you all for joining our webinars today. Kim, thank you for the presentation, and we hope everyone has a great day. So thank you.
bye.